at the end, we were over 4,000 people. And so for a younger founder or a younger CEO, learning the mechanics of how to scale at 10 employees, 100 employees, 1,000 employees, that was very eye-opening. And I was able to learn that as Support Ninja. It also means that when you're considering an exit, there's a lot more mechanics in play around communication and preparation going into it. If you have 14 different departments and you're trying to figure out how to get everything to align going into an acquisition, it takes a decent chunk of work.
All right. I am here with Connor Tomkies, and he is the operating partner at the Entrepreneur Cooperative. How's it going, Connor?
Hey, Steve. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to connect. And I want to really unpack multiple successes here. But before we get to it, let's talk about your background. How did you get started in business?
Yeah, so I started in college, kind of like in the age of where it's really cool to start your own business and try to start something from nothing. And we had a company called Delegate It that was kind of like a Zendesk before Zendesk. And we ended up selling that for parts. So it wasn't a good exit. So maybe we can talk about the soft landings of selling a company for parts and what that looks like. But at the same time, I was also doing a company called Embark, and that actually did pretty well. That was a dog genetics company.
Nice. Very nice. And yeah, I'm curious as to like at a young age going through something like a parts or fire sale exit, we could call it. How did it initially begin? Was it a customer or a partner that you ended up just sort of saying like, hey, we're ready to do something else. Here's like the assets, or how did it begin and how did it end?
Yeah, I think the important thing is instead of being everything for everyone, we were focusing on what was HomeAway or now VRBO and Airbnb, and focusing on being the back end to combine like text message and web chat and application chat all together into a centralized hub for them to communicate with their hosts and guests. So we had a very specific use case and very specific parts that we could kind of piecemeal and sell out. And then the remainder we put as an open source kind of piece. And that was really good from like a building connection standpoint and making sure that the technology kind of lives on beyond the company. And so that was a nice kind of like feel good moment. Is we were working, the core dev team was working on a project called Planktos that was essentially a mesh network at the end of Delegate It that lets you connect kind of like peer-to-peer versus from server to a computer or to a device. And that's like a really big deal now. And it was in Silicon Valley, and it was like a side project that we were working on that I think like Peter Thiel like commented on it on Twitter. And so some really good things kind of came out of this. But it's kind of hard to digest whenever you work on something for 2.5 years.
Yeah, definitely. And after that kind of transpired, you learned a ton. You really kind of figured out how like you could call it, even though it was a sale of parts, an exit occurs, how it happened, and that like unlocked in your brain. So you were ready for the next venture. What was the next journey?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if there's a learning of what to do or what not to do with this, because we were doing two things at the same time. So I was still working on Delegate It, and there was a company called Embark that originated with two brothers out of Cornell University. One was a professor of dog genetics, and they had this idea of expanding this massive database of dogs, of genetic information essentially. And you can take that genetic information and apply it to human studies. So dogs also have glaucoma, humans have glaucoma, right? And so you can take that research on a massive scale and be able to find different markers that help you learn about what might lead to this disease or what might lead to this outcome. And candidly, I wasn't really sure if it was going to work, but we got working on it in February. We got started on it in fall, and we launched it in February. We were on Good Morning America. We sold out of all of our kits. They recently did a round, and SoftBank led that round for around $750 million top line evaluation, I think a couple of years ago. So none of the founding team is still involved in that project, but it's a really cool company, and they did some really cool stuff.
Nice. I mean, that is quite the exposure to scale. I think a lot of people when they start on a founding team, dream and imagine and have a vision for scale, but when it actually comes, it's often different than you expect it, I think.
Yeah, it kind of pulls you. It kind of like smacks you on the head and being like, what are you doing with this other project, right? Whenever this one's seeing so much traction. And so sometimes it's nice to be pulled in a direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the venture after that. I think there's so much to be unpacked here. How long did it take for you between these ventures? Was it immediate? Did you just jump right in, or how did it get started?
Yeah, we jumped right in. So at Embark and a few other companies, we were seeing issues with outsourcing support. And this was, if I was to break off like the 3 different generations of outsourcing, the first one is like you have cables and you're doing direct phone lines. And this was big in like the 90s. The second generation is you have like these bigger facilities and you're becoming a little bit more modern, and this is where TaskUs and some of the bigger players come in. And then that's when we started Support Ninja. So kind of focusing on how do you actually make a great environment to work in? How do you actually find top talent internationally and pull them together and then put them in front of the fastest growing tech companies is essentially the premise. And similar to Embark, we kind of felt like this pull towards international work. There was a couple of trends that really lined up with this, as far as like it's easier to have high-speed internet connection. It's easier to, during the pandemic, people were more open to remote work. And then this idea that you can hire the best talent, not just in your city or your country, but anywhere in the world from top universities was a pretty appealing idea. And so we launched Support Ninja with 2 other people. And it was very interesting because a people business is completely different from software and completely different from having a dog genetics product that you're shipping out to people. And so it comes with its own challenges.
And starting with two other, I guess, co-founders or business associates, did you guys raise a round? Did you just start on, bootstrapping it? How did you guys get the spark to start?
This one was bootstrapped, and that is great and terrible on its own. I mean, like, we were having a hard time making payroll on my like wedding day, and so we were like on the phone trying to figure out how to like make things work and how to make the bank transfers go through. But on the other hand, we were able to grow very rapidly using funding from our customers, which is the most organic way to do it. I think more companies should consider bootstrapping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the best investors are our customers, hands down. So
for sure,
even on your wedding day, you're managing payroll, getting it started.
Mm-hmm.
What were the main KPIs that you guys were tracking? Like as a sort of a talent, outsourced talent kind of focus that you were doing, what were the drivers? Like what were you guys really defining success with?
What was crazy about the outsourcing space at the time is that they had an insane amount of turnover. Like they were seeing 20% plus every month, meaning that you're replacing your entire workforce in less than a year. For us, we wanted to see that voluntary, we call it voluntary and involuntary, at 2% or lower, which is an order of magnitude less than where it is currently in the industry. Meaning that even if people like leave because they're moving or for a family member job, then that number has to be less than 2%. It means that you don't have to retrain people constantly for accounts. Customers really like it. And to do that, you really have to be a company worth working for, which is one of the most important things to me, is that they have to like coming in. They have to like where they're at. People spend 8+ hours like inside a space. You have to like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, often people underestimate the baked in cost there, where you mentioned the percentages briefly, but 100% turnover in a workforce.
Yeah.
The dramatic level of cost associated with turnover, and hiring is always like just this Achilles heel for everyone operating any business in any industry, but especially with that amount of turnover, I mean, it's like quicksand in terms of everybody that's, doing the onboarding, getting to know other people, the culture, all of it is just such a dynamic and expensive thing on an ongoing basis. So that makes perfect sense that you guys were just trying to attack that like turnover number and reducing that. And how big did the team get leading up to the exit?
So at the end, we were over 4,000 people. And so for a younger founder or a younger CEO, learning the mechanics of how to scale at 10 employees, 100 employees, 1,000 employees, that was very eye-opening. And I was able to learn that as Support Ninja. It also means that when you're considering an exit, there's a lot more mechanics in play around communication and preparation going into it. If you have 14 different departments and you're trying to figure out how to get everything into line going into an acquisition, it takes a decent chunk of work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of humans all running in the same direction to communicate.
Lots of humans. Yeah, for sure.
4,000. And that includes all of the talent that's supporting customers, right? And the internal team that was sort of immediate team. What was the size of that? And then what was the size of like the support individuals?
Yeah, for sure. So the core team the team that's like helping facilitate and helping like support the other departments, right? That group is probably around 300, and then everyone else is. And so that's one thing that we have to pay attention to, is that you don't want to be too bogged down with a bunch of different departments. It gets in the way of making sure that you provide a good experience. Mm-hmm. And so that's a little tricky. You're seeing a lot more companies kind of pop up because you don't necessarily need that massive infrastructure anymore, or those 14 different departments. You're seeing companies like Somewhere or Marketer Hire, where they're just facilitating the hiring process and then connecting you to an EOR or an employer of record provider. And that is a extreme light version of what we were doing at Support Ninja.
Got it. So shifting gears a little bit to some advice, because we're going to get to it in a minute on how you're on both sides, buy and sell side. But I want to talk a little bit about preparedness, because that level of scale, when you go through a transition, we'll call it, is pretty extreme when it comes to being prepared. So what tips could you share with entrepreneurs that are listening to this about how to prepare a business at that size, or just in general for getting ready for an exit?
My biggest priority right now is something that we're pushing called the side-by-side program at the Entrepreneur Cooperative, where we pair a post-exit founder with a pre-exit founder. Mm-hmm. I think that's the number one thing that you can do, is find other entrepreneurs that have done it, that are willing to share their time and go through it with you. Even better if you find someone that's inside your industry. And so I spend most of my day talking to entrepreneurs, matching them with post-exit founders that have sold to the major players inside the space, that can also help them with not just like the logistics and the negotiation of the sale and the process, but also the emotional side of what that founder might be going through, any partnership disputes that might be happening during the negotiation process, and then life after. So I would probably say that's like the biggest thing I would recommend to folks. The logistical side is, I like to flip the order of operations a little bit, where normally you go out, if you're doing a bigger sale, you talk to a banker or to a broker to help you facilitate the transaction and get each of the different buyers moving in lockstep. So that way you can have a competitive process, and then you can improve the price of your company whenever you go to market. Normally that banker or broker will build a SIM, a confidential information memorandum for your company. It outlines everything that makes you who you are. I would flip the order of operations there and actually make the SIM before finding your banker or broker. So that's you and your co-founder kind of sitting down and building out what that looks like, and then using that SIM as leverage to reach out to a wide variety of bankers and brokers and vet them. So whenever we sold Support Ninja, I talked to 25 different bankers and brokers, but I sent them a SIM saying like, this is who we are, this is the angle, and this is the approach. And then I saw who was prepared for that meeting and who wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Vetting the brokers is definitely smart. And in terms of valuation, how did you step into that when you're talking to, let's say, 25 brokers, you're vetting them? How would you approach valuation in those conversations, and I guess even with a buyer?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because we would be talking to bankers and brokers, and we didn't go with the one that gave us the highest valuation of what they thought they could get us. We actually thought that that valuation was reasonable, and maybe they didn't do enough research on our business to know where it was at. So for us, most of the time we're going to be looking at like an EBITDA multiple and what's happening inside the industry. And lucky for us, we had a company that went public that had a really good EBITDA multiple, which had every other private equity firm and strategic looking at what's on the market and can I also get one of these companies before their EBITDA multiple spikes. And so timing is a big part of it, and then making sure that it's reasonable and based on some form of logic or process or approach. I think that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And for everybody listening, one of the key things that was just, you mentioned very, very quickly there was about the IPO company in terms of all aspects of funding from VCs, exits, all of it. People want to see a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's an IPO and people going public. So when you're watching specific industries, that's such a good indicator to say like, all right, what is this company and their valuation at? And this will happen throughout the process. If you're getting like a 409A or one of these valuations throughout the process, you're able to point to IPOs. So I'm glad that you brought that up because it shows promise as to what you can kind of sit next to. You can say, hey, this team did this, and we have finally like a benchmark to use. And I'm really glad that you brought that up because it's such a value to entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah, there's a different type of mindset that you have whenever you're going to sell your company that you kind of have to learn. You have to understand what people are looking for and what language they're speaking. And so you can build a $50 million revenue company and not understand that the importance of EBITDA to these investors, or understand what multiple on invested capital that they're looking to get back from their fund. And so I know this guy, Boris, we had him on the Made It podcast 3 weeks ago, and he every single year would prep his company for sale and go through that process, which sounds like a nightmare to me, but it worked for him. So I think there's definitely some key learnings there.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's shift to timing. I think everybody's different. Every business is different, but I always like to get everybody's take on why was it the right time for you to sell, and what advice could you share around when the right time to exit is?
There's such a wide variety of reasons for that timing. It could be personal. It could be like timing the market, and also do you know where the company is going? In which case, are you excited about what you have to do to get there? I mean, that's a really big kind of piece of it. For us, we started out with the three of us, and one of the partners wanted to exit, and a couple of us went, the other two, me and currently the CEO, we wanted to stay on. And that was the biggest driver, is we wanted to figure out how do we take some chips off the table and then continue to execute on what we want to execute on. And so that was probably the biggest driver. And we started going through the process of finding buyers, and we weren't in a position where we had to sell, but we found the right person to sell the company to, and everything lined up. So that's what led to it for us.
Nice. Very nice. I'll ask the finale question, and then we'll talk about what you're currently building, because I think we should spend quite the rest talking about that. But knowing what you know now, what would you tell Connor 10 years ago?
I think your first exit is important. I think just going through that process and being able to get some chips off the table and get some liquidity is really important. And also that entrepreneurship is a cycle. Like you don't just start a business, scale it and sell it, and then you're retired. Like, I think that was a little illusion that I had. And if you go through that process, you're going to find that you might love running a company, and you might feel antsy or anxious, and that's perfectly fine. And so in which case, kind of think of it more as a career, and think about the connections and the people that you're building those companies with. And those are going to be the people that you build the next one with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were just talking about that before we started recording, was just the antsy vibe after the exit.
That might just be me, but yeah, I think there's a lot of other founders that get antsy.
Oh yeah, 100%. And maybe the mirage is needed, like the
Mm-hmm.
mirage of the retirement that actually now just scares me thinking about sitting quietly somewhere. But I think it might be needed for the first or couple, just to think and then drive you as an agent or something in the bushes that you're trying to run towards. But let's shift to what you're doing now. I think that this is super valuable. I'm a big fan and practitioner of mentorship. I love meeting with people, and also just in general, like getting advice from everyone that I can. So I really like how you've built out this current community. What is it, and kind of how does it work for entrepreneurs that are listening?
Yeah, for sure. I run the Entrepreneur Cooperative. So it's a co-op, meaning that the members of the community actually guide and shape the community. And we have monthly sessions, guest speakers, and the bigger thing that we're doing in October 15th, is that we're doing a 6-week seminar every Tuesday from 4 to 6 with guest speakers, like the best people in their industry that have sold a business, know how it's done, talking about a very specific topic that will help you prepare to sell. And so that's my biggest priority, is to help people figure out what that process looks like and then have a better life after. And that transition is really hard and challenging. There's logistics involved, and then there's also emotions and co-founder dynamics at play. So I want to try to help as many people kind of go through that process as possible.
Yeah, and I've noticed that, it is really empowering, and people that are listening, really, it's important to look things up like this. Entrepreneur Cooperative is a powerful concept in general, finding people like-minded, being around them, because it is lonely for sure when you're going through something as dynamic as an exit. And you brought up it multiple times. You brought it up about after. This is often like not even discussed about, just focusing on like the diligence period and getting through it and making sure that everything is in order. But it's literally like a cliff, and if you're not ready for post transaction, it can be a total train wreck. So talking to people that have done it, that are comfortable talking about it, is so valuable. And I guess with what you've seen, what are some of the like fun examples that you've seen of a pre-exit founder and a post-exit founder talking?
Yeah. So this is maybe an open call out. Like if you are selling your business or have recently sold your business and you want to chat, hit me up on LinkedIn. It's just Connor Tomkies, and I'm glad to connect. Not only that, I will throw you a party. Like if you want a party in your city, I will find other post-exit founders, and we will like have a beer and toast to a job well done. I think what I've enjoyed the most so far is this side-by-side kind of mentorship program, where you're specifically connecting one founder that sold in that area with another founder that's about to sell in that area. And that's really cool because they build this lasting relationship. You kind of have this third party that's helping them outside of the banker and broker, helping them through the process. And then afterwards, if they maintain that relationship, that makes me ecstatic. So if we go to like a founder dinner or something like that, and they're sitting side by side and they built that relationship, then that means the world to me. So I get really happy about that. And so we have currently 8 different companies that are kind of matched up with post-exit founders right now that are going through the process as of this moment. So it's really cool to kind of see them go through that flow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a valuable process to provide, or good thought process to provide to someone who hasn't done something like this before, because it's so lonely. I can't think of a better way to describe it. Like, and you can't, if you talk to people, sometimes it can come across weird when you're talking about big numbers and employees, and all these things can just come across poorly when you're communicating it. So talking to somebody who's done it and been in the trenches before is just such a valuable aspect to this. So where can people learn more about it? Obviously, your LinkedIn, they can reach out to you, but where can they join the cooperative?
Yeah, for sure. So it's the entrepreneurcooperative.com. We also have the Entrepreneur Co-op in like all different variants of that URL that you guys can check out. And we also have a podcast called the Made It Pod, where we interview post-exit founders and we talk about how they sold their business, but more about like the life after, how do you have that kind of ending where you're happy and fulfilled. So yeah, check me out there.
Right on. All right. Well, wherever you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, the links that Connor mentioned will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on, Connor.
Good to be on, Steve. Appreciate it. Bye.